Okay, guys, picking up where we left off. I don't know why it's doing frames per second right now. Oh, I animated the player. Sorry. Sorry, it was going a little bit crazy over there. So picking up where we left off, and speaking of picking up where we left off, one thing that keeps catching me is when you're doing Scratch, it is really good about saving all your changes automatically. Not so with Blender, so you have to go up and do the File, Save, or you should probably, as we'll talk about in class, save as and do different versions of your file as you move along, so you can always revert back to one that worked. But yeah, I keep losing progress because I keep forgetting, oh, I have to actually tell it to save my file. Very interesting. Okay, so back where we were, in our last thing, we had just done hello world, which is, instead of saying print hello, because it's a tradition among our people to do a hello world, we did a hello world there, and we were able to get the console to say hello world. To do that, remember, you can't see it unless you toggle system control, so that system console, so that you will, so that when you're running scripts, they will show up. Okay, and then the author, what is his name? I'm assuming, am I assuming it's a guy? That's terrible. Chris. So I don't know if it's a guy or girl. Could be a guy or a girl with a name like Chris. The author, after you do the hello thing, and they have the getting serious now, I'm going to advise you to maybe skip most of the getting serious now. What this does, let's talk a little bit about it. First, you're going to import, this part is important, the import BGE. That's the Blender Game Engine. So an engine in something like Blender is a whole bunch of code, including libraries of functions that you get to use that somebody else made. And the Blender Game Engine is what turns Blender into a game making tool instead of just a 3D art making tool. So we are going to want to have that import BGE in our file. So that goes at the very beginning of a code file. Okay. And there's lots of places where you would use import, or some software languages say use or whatever. And what that's going to give us is another library of functions. So Scratch comes with a library of functions. Scratch comes with a bunch of stuff that it does for you already, which are, they're listed, this thing here with all of these color-coded things and all of these are functions, and, well, data lets you set up variables, but all the rest of them are functions, or ways of creating your own functions. And this is your function library. So you can use play sound, or you could use rest for 0.25 beats, or you could use change volume. Those are all things that are in your library of functions. So we say import BGE. What that does is make a connection from our code to a certain library of functions. There are so many libraries of functions out there that it would be very inefficient if our code at the beginning connected up to all of them when it might only use a few of them. So that, again, we were talking about in class, we don't want to take up all the counter space, all the memory, by importing all those functions that we're never going to use. So we only import the ones we're going to use. All right, so I have this added. I hit enter to make sure that it's all, I'm on a new line to make sure it's all there. So I'm going to click, I have to be hovering in this window. I'm going to press P for play. I'm going to hit escape and see if I got any errors. I did not get any errors. I got the same result, so that's good. So we can assume it's importing correctly, or it would have given us an error. The next thing he has is the part I'm going to advise you to skip. So dir BGE is a function that will list for you all the things that are in the BGE library. And he's suggesting that you print this out. When you do print it out, you'll see that there's a bunch of stuff, and one of those things is logic. And so he says, okay, then go to the logic, BGE logic library, which is under there, and print those out. And it gives you a whole bunch of variables. The variables are, or these are constants, variables, different things you can access that are in all caps. And then down here, the ones that are in what we call camel case, because it has lowercase and uppercase in it, these are all functions, and that's what he's calling the important bits. Now, I don't think you need to print this out. It's kind of extra stuff, but if you want to, sure, go ahead. All you have to do is put that in after your BGE, and it will work. Okay, so the thing, oh, and then you go even further down. You go down to Get Current Controller, and it will show you all the things associated with Get Current Controller. I think we'll talk about that more as we move ahead with game design in Blender, so you can kind of skip that now. So we're going to skip down to Scripting for Reals. So now we want to do something with our car. So the import BGE is already there. We're going to get rid of our hello world because we don't need it anymore. And we're going to do this thing. I'm just going to copy and paste it. You feel free to copy and paste it on your own. Okay, this first statement, we talked about equals just in class yesterday. We talked about equals as sometimes it's a command. In this case, it's a command to Python. We are making a variable called cont, which is a terrible thing to name it, so we're going to use proper naming technique, and we're going to say, let's see, we're going to call it, it's the current controller, so we're going to call it the current controller, and I'm going to say for car. I don't know if I'll need the for car, because I think this is limited to the car scope. Okay, so this is just a variable. We're going to name it something long and specific, because that is a good practice, which we'll talk about more when we talk more about the Wizard War. And what this does is it gets us, this is called a handle, it gets us a handle to the current controller, which is all the way, it's part of BGE, but it's part of logic, and in logic there's this function called get current controller, and it has two parentheses that tells you it's a function. You need to get a handle on it because we're going to do things to the current controller, and the computer doesn't know when you say, I want to use the controller, there's going to be lots of controllers, right? And it's going to be like, well, which one? Which one are you talking about that you want me to go change things to, right? So this is called getting a handle. So we get the current controller and it is now entered. Now we can just use this variable when we want to talk to the current controller. Okay, cont.owner was related when this thing was called cont. The current controller has a thing called an owner, and we are going to use it. So I have to change this cont, which was the same thing as up here, to this whole big thing, because that's what I changed my variable to. Okay, when I got a handle to it, now there is an owner that the current controller has. So I'm going to want to apparently talk to the owner. Now I need to, this is not a very specific naming thing, so I'm going to do current controller owner. Okay, and that is going to put that, so now when I want to use these things, I could just use these two variables. All right, let's hit run. So I have to, again, have my mouse over here. I'm going to hit P, and then I hit escape. I'm going to check my console and see if I had any errors. No errors. Oh, and my hello world went away because I took that thing out. All right, so we're following along pretty well. All right. And then he's just sort of explaining those. delete the always sensor and add 2 keyboard sensors, one for the up key and one for the down key. Okay, so, and we're going to rename these up and down. The name matters because we will be calling these sensors by name in the Python script. Okay, so I'll do that part and then we'll end this video. Okay, so I can delete the always controller. This thing stays around. I can connect it to other things. And I'm going to add keyboard controller. Okay. And let's see. I think I name it here. I'm going to call it up keyboard controller. Nice descriptive name. And I think, let me see how he lists the. There are ASCII things that I could put in if this was C or something like that, but I need to see what do they use. Key up arrow. Okay, so it's that first box. Okay, so press a key. Oh, so I press the up arrow. Oh, nice. It puts that in there for me. Okay, so I'm going to add another one of those. I'm running out of time in this video, but let me go over and show you what that is in Scratch. So you've probably done this before. So what we have is a sensor that's going to keep checking to see if the keyboard is doing something. How you would do that in Scratch is if key up arrow is pressed, then, and we need this controller over here is going to keep looking at it to check and see if anything's happening with the up arrow. That just seems to be the way they built it in, but in Scratch we kind of had to add that extra forever. But this whole piece is that part that we just added to right here. That's what we just added. Okay, I'll come back in a little bit with another video.